Season 5 of Binge O'Clock Podcast will be discussing The Terror, an AMC show based on the book of the same name. Although The Terror is a fictionalization of real events, the material depicts medical, survival, and supernatural horror, as well as racism, misogyny, gore, and violence. Listener discretion is advised.
Hello, friends, and welcome to Binge O'Clock, the podcast where we watch something and then we talk about it. I'm Joy Selden, and I've seen almost everything.
I'm Nyanga, and I've seen almost nothing.
I'm Nella, and damn, Sir Franklin, you are that middle school girl who cuts their old bestie out of the friendship circle. Like, that was brutal.
Brutal! I was really short on time, dear listeners, as I was preparing for this podcast episode, but I had 7 minutes to spare once I finished watching the episode, and what did I do with those 7 minutes? I went back and I rewatched that takedown.
Sir Franklin may never have hurt a fly, but damn, could he cut a birch, according to the show.
This is all theory, and none of it is proven at all, but...
Episode 3, The Ladder. The crew dispose of the Inuit shaman in the sea through a hole in the ice, and Lady Silence sets out alone on foot. Franklin and Crozier angrily debate their crew's future and disagree sharply about Crozier's suggestion that they send out a party on foot to seek help. Franklin joins a group of armed Royal Marines who have set a hunting blind for the creature that killed Lieutenant Gore, but it ambushes the group, killing a Marine and Franklin, who drowns after the creature tears off his leg and tosses him into the same hole where the British had dumped the shaman. Crozier later sends out a party across the ice to seek help, despite the protests of James Fitzjames. I always forget that his first name is James. Now Captain of Erebus.
It's literally June 1847, days later. Yep.
And then we open on the scene on the deck of the ship.
Yeah.
Of one of the Marines who was in, or one of the Marines who wants to go in the snowblind because he was actually the one who shot the Inuit man. Mm-hmm. And he gets asked by Georgie on deck, what's it like shooting a man? And he says, shooting a man's more fun when you mean to do it, I'll tell you that.
But also, Georgie wants to trade his pork rinds or his salted pork for a turn in the snowblind.
The salted pork was like the favorite food of the lower decks.
I mean, the best thing is that, entirely by coincidence, I was chomping on some pork rinds as I was attempting to get through this episode. So it was very like,
you did
pork
mention
rinds.
That. I forgot you said that.
I kind of love the attitude at the beginning of this episode versus the end of the episode, which I know we're not at the end of the episode yet. But at the beginning of the episode, it's very much like, there's sort of almost like an excitement around the bear, which is interesting, even though the bear has killed one of these Marines in sort of a gruesome fashion. Since the only person who saw it is Good Sir, everyone else is just exchanging rumor after rumor. Like, who saw it? Was it the bear? Was it wearing the lieutenant's medals? Like, no, obviously. Yeah. But all of those rumors are going on. And then we cut to a group of men who are preparing the shaman's body for what I refuse to call any sort of funeral or death rite. They're just preparing it for burial, I suppose.
Yeah, it's just burial. They're not taking any care in the matter aside from sewing him up in his own furs, which, I mean, if this were someone on the ship, he would have been sewn up in his hammock and buried at sea. But there would have been some ceremony done. Yeah. Yeah.
I was confused a lot at the beginning of this because, they were like ripping the shaman's clothes apart and trying, like pulling bits of the clothing, like the harder pieces of the clothing out of it. And like two of the pieces they pull out are really important. And we'll talk about the two tokens they pull out. But they were also pulling out just like, I was trying to figure out what those bits and baubles were that they were gathering up and that they gave to the man's daughter, which initially I actually thought that they were stripping the body and we're just going to steal those items. And so I was happy to see that bare minimum, they returned some of those personal belongings to the daughter.
Just not the important ones.
Not the important ones.
I mean, so tokens. we do know that the Nasilic, who are the indigenous of this area, do have a tradition of carrying a lot of amulets on them.
Yeah.
they sort of tie it into more of a Greenland Inuit tradition of what the tumbuk is based on. I mean, not necessarily one for one in Inuit mythology and in magic, but it's based on.
Okay. Because I was like figuring out that piece of it. Happy to see, bare minimum, the men didn't steal any of the possessions from the shaman.
But also, no one let the woman anywhere near the body to like take care of the body and in the way that's appropriate.
Also, like I hope this doesn't take you too far off track, but because it's definitely relevant here and definitely relevant at the end of the episode, what's a fire hole?
Okay, yeah, let's go. So
I already told her, I was like, you're going to have to explain that.
At first, my brain went to the worst possible place, and I thought they were literally dumping the body down a toilet. And I was like, what the? And then I looked at it closer, and I was like, okay, so clearly not a toilet, maybe a spot for gathering water, but I was trying to figure it out.
Yes, so the point of a fire hole is if you are trapped in the ice and you're still on a wooden ship, and it's, dark 23 hours out of the day. So you're running your oil lamps and other open flamed sort of things. If there is a fire on board, you'd better put it out really quick. But you're surrounded by ice, and ice is hard to crack through. So you keep fire holes open around the ship, and they are pretty much water wells. So you need to, keep making sure that the ice hasn't iced back over it. You're constantly clearing them so that if you have to very quickly put out a fire, you're not relying on the short supply of fresh water on board. You are because you just need salt water. You don't need a regular water for it.
Oh.
So it's just for quick access to larger amounts of water so you can get a bucket brigade going.
Interesting.
Because the last thing you want to lose when you're trapped in the Arctic ice is your ship.
Yeah, because they can't actually drink any of the water they retrieve from the fire hole, right? Okay,
and
that's what was confusing to me. I was like, wait, but they can't drink that water, so what is that
They
for?
would have had a desalinator on the ship's stoves, but, that takes time to desalinate water. So this is for a quick, large supply of water. And there would have been more than one fire hole placed in the ice.
And so
she explained that, and I went, well, that makes sense.
So what they do with the shaman's body is what? Like the closest thing they've got to putting a body out to sea?
Yeah.
Because they just toss it in there and I mean, it's not.
No, it's not dignified.
It's not dignified. That's exactly the word I was looking for. They rod the body in with poles.
It would have been how they would have put anyone out to sea, because you have to figure these men are 11 to 15 miles away from shore.
They're not going to dig into any kind of land.
Yeah, and
anywhere.
as we start to see at this point, the pressure of the pack ice is starting to create these mounds and hills and mountains of ice being popped up and pushed up. So you create almost this labyrinth of ice between the two ships.
Yeah.
And you're not taking a jaunt down to land just because at this point. And there was a lot of theories for many long time about, did they bury Sir John on land? Did they go through that effort to do so because he was the commander? I'm of the theory that they just buried him at sea.
Like down a fire hole the way.
But there would have been a ceremony for it. There would have, attention would have been paid, but they're not going to, because we're white men in the 1840s, they do not extend the same respect at all. Even if it's not the Inuit tradition, it's still a body to be respected, right?
I have a potentially dumb question to ask, which is, since it's so cold out, why can't they is there a reason they can't just keep the bodies just frozen until they presumably actually reach land or somewhere where the bodies can receive a proper burial? Like, are they worried about animals? Like, why can't they just keep the bodies?
So one of the things the book really goes into for horror purposes, but something that you would still have on board, are the rats. And the rats are reproducing. They're getting into the food stores. And the book very, very clearly does try to do that. Whereas men start dying, they put them down into the coldest part of the hold where they're frozen solid.
Wait,
but the rats are eating the bodies.
Well, if they're stuck in the ice, couldn't they keep the bodies outside the ship?
So you don't want the bodies outside the ship because in real life you would have to worry about polar bears eating the bodies.
Okay.
These are animals that can smell dead meat miles away.
Fair.
And the last thing you want is a bunch of polar bears wandering, sniffing around your ships. Even though that probably would have been, that would have been great food. Just don't eat the livers. But still, like, do I want to ever mess with a polar bear? Not in your life.
Well, especially, some of the ones that might be out that far might be starving, and then you're dealing with a starving polar bear.
Yeah. Like, I've seen enough videos of black and brown bears breaking into houses to get at food. I would know if I saw a polar bear out in the Arctic, even if it were on a big ironclad wooden boat, I'd be like, and this is how we die. The bear's going to eat us.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So this is all clicking into place nicely, which is that this wasn't actually... Like, listen, obviously the most respectful thing would have been to give the man's body back to his daughter.
Exactly.
Right? But barring that, which for some reason they don't want to do, what they've chosen to do with the body, which is to put it down the fire hole, is not as disrespectful as I was imagining, because this is what they would actually have done with everyone.
Yeah.
More than likely, yeah.
Okay.
But I mean, they still disrespected the body by simply stripping it down and taking things and not taking other things. And when it was just like, that's not your crew?
Yeah.
That's not your, like, why are you preparing the body?
Why not just give it back?
And again, here we have, Mr. Good Sir, the sole voice of decency, being like, I don't think that's part of their ritual. Why are we doing it this way? Oh, poor Good Sir, thinking he'll be buried. But he won't fit in the coffin that way. Good Sir, they're not burying him.
I love this follow-up, because what happens is Lady Silence, who gets her name, the men are just like, she was talking up a storm before and now she hasn't said a word. So this is the first instance of her being called Lady Silence, gets the belongings that they deemed for her to have. And she is instantly like, I'm missing some things, but they don't fully understand what she's saying. And her father's already gone, so it's not like she could even get them.
I mean, it's almost like the ring in the grave all over again, right?
Yeah.
It's like, it's too late. There's no way to go back to get it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It harkens back to that really, really easily. And she leaves the ship and builds herself an igloo.
In sight of the two ships, because she knows, and as we are about to find out, that they are being hunted and by something she has a connection to.
Yeah.
Oh, that ring. Did, Hickey steal that ring? Not to take us off base.
Spoilers.
Well, yes, I don't know.
Hickey stole the ring.
He climbed into the coffin.
No, the thing to remember about Hickey is every time you see Hickey do thing,
jerk.
He has 3 other Xanatos gambits happening in his head.
Yeah.
Not successfully, but he thinks he's playing the long game in every single choice he makes.
Yeah,
Hickey,
when
man.
I saw him climb in, and what's funny is, and I'll bring us back on track very soon, I promise. What's funny is that because of the general face blindness, I didn't realize that was Hickey who climbed into the coffin until y'all pointed that out to me during our second podcast episode. And the minute you told me that was Hickey, I was like, oh, now I know why he was in the coffin.
Yeah.
Okay, but anyway, sorry. So the girl builds...
We've already kind of spoiled it for you because Hickey is such a brat.
Because we're like, never trust Hickey.
Well, but if it wasn't immediately obvious in the last episode, it becomes very, very, very obvious in this one.
Yes.
Sorry, I took us off track.
Nella,
you were about to... Yeah.
No, I just really like the scene of, Edward Little, one of the lieutenants on the Terror, being like, do you think they're going to seek out vengeance for what we did? And Crozier having to be like, having never wronged them, I couldn't testify. And of course, and you'll see this built up, of course, as you have the two camps, people who have no experience with the Inuit, who thinks any native is a savage and therefore is dangerous, and we must treat them as dangerous. And then you have the people who are either decent, like Good Sir, or with some experience in the Arctic, who are just like, these people are too busy staying alive to wage a war. Like, this is not a problem you think it is. Although I do love Crozier being like, when Little's like, should we have let her go? And he's like, were we supposed to put her down the fire hole as well? Like,
it's not exactly our prisoner.
she's not our prisoner. Now, in the book, she pretty much is their prisoner. She stays on board and pretty much lives in the front of the ship where the sails are kept for a long time. And Irving is the one who builds this relationship with her and starts discovering her connection to the Tombach. And then eventually she leaves the ship and is still sort of like haunting it on the ice. But of course, she's much more, and I'm really glad for this change from the book, where she's much more mysterious and everyone calls her the witch and stuff like that. And it's just, I much more prefer the way the show has done it, where they don't keep her on the ships very long. And then she is keeping an eye on them because she has her own worries and fears about what has occurred.
No, I love, so far anyway, the way the role that Lady Silence plays in this episode, even though it's a small part, it's clearly an integral one. So I'm excited to see where we go with that. Now, question. What do we do first? Do we deal with, maybe we deal with like Hickey real quick because he's important, but just like a little bit of the episode. And then we dive into Francis and
and there's also Franklin stuff before the denouement. Like there's a whole, the whole episode is essentially Franklin and Crozier.
Oh yeah, 100%. So like what's Hickey doing in this episode? Why is he in here?
So Hickey's there because he is not as concerned about the, appearance that they made in front of the officer as his lover is.
Now remember, the officer was Irving. Irving is painted as a very stick in the mud, very religious, very shocked by what he tries. He's very much trying not to think about what it was. And Gibson knows this because Gibson is a steward to the officers. He's their servant pretty much. So he has a much better handle on what the officers are like.
Coerced.
And he paints a very convincing story to Irving about how he was coerced by Hickey, which is gross, but better than what the book does, because Hickey's partner in the book isn't Gibson. It's a man described as a half-wit named Munson. And it's just like, at least the show is consensual because you're not so sure of it in the book. It's really gross in the book.
I wonder if they're referencing the book there, actually. I wonder if they're updating it to be like, well, actually, it's the Navy, and, you know, boys get lonely at sea, and this happens regardless of sexual preference sometimes. It's just like you make decisions, and there it is.
Right, which is what Gibson is arguing here, that he's like, well, this isn't usually my preference, but I was alone and at sea, and you were there. Right? And he's like, but you know what? Now it's over because I want to remain in good standing with commands, and just kind of
he thinks, and he thinks he's saved both of them by doing this, because Irving is the type of officer to never actually make it a big deal because Gibson is like, I'm a victim, don't talk about it. And Irving respects that.
And thinks that he can save Gibson and Hickey. It will save Gibson from Hickey and save Hickey from himself. Right?
Yes, exactly.
And so that's how it plays out.
I got a lot of vibes of the turn it off like a light switch, just go click, and like you're just not gay anymore. Just crochet, just like learn, find a craft.
When
and I was like, can we not?
To like, oh, have you ever tried singing or watercoloring or climbing exercises?
You know, watercoloring was a very important skill to have on exploration, by the way, because how else are you supposed to depict the natural beauty around you if you don't have somebody who can watercolor? It's a useful skill. There would have been the ingredients on board to pick up watering coloring during the winter.
I mean, listen, I'm not knocking it. I'm just saying that it's not necessarily what Irving is making it out to be here.
I'm sure his heart was in the right place, but that's unhelpful.
And then,
but anyway,
and then Hickey gets his revenge. And that's how that little thread is tied, I suppose, at the end of the episode.
Well, even before we get to that point, again, we have Hickey trying to one-up Gibson again with, you got back into Irving's good graces, but I had a drink with the captain.
Oh, you mentioned this last week.
But again,
I forgot about
Hickey doesn't understand the officers like Gibson does. And Gibson is the one who points out, rightfully so, that, Crozier will drink with anyone if it means he gets to have a drink. Like,
I love
ask
that
Jobson.
Little, exactly. Ask Mr. This, ask Mr. That. Like, they've all had a private.
Everyone knows that. Everyone knows that. And Hickey, once again, thinking he had the step up the rung over Gibson, and he straight up says, like, you may have, what was the exact line about the ladder that he says? Because again, this episode is called The Ladder.
You've drawn the ladder, but you've put me on the wrong rung or something like that.
Yeah. But, again, Hickey has miscalculated again. And this is going to keep happening where Hickey miscalculates something. And things happen because of it. But
now,
then, of course...
how often does he poop in someone's bed?
Well, no, that's a one-off, but...
Not often.
I guess
he reserves that for the people who really tick him off.
But then also, not only does he do that, but he rifles around one of the captain's quarters. So then he finds the "I'm committing treason" letter. Which and why does that happen? Let's roll back the footage a little bit and go back to what happens with Crozier and Franklin.
Okay, good, because this is like the meat of the episode.
So Franklin first.
Yeah.
So, we get to see the two officers as they're sitting down, two sets of officers on their individual ships. And then Crozier is dealing with the conversation about Lady Silence and, like, will she bring her,
like a warring party
tribe of people? Yeah, exactly. Where it's just like, please shoot me. And then Franklin is dealing with an empty seat at the officers' table, and he's having a lot of trouble with that. And, we get this great, like, 3-scene flashback where we have him looking at this empty plate and then being told off by finally we get to meet Sir John. Yeah,
Sir John Ross. But even before that, the reason we go back to this scene is because he sees Gore at, like, pretty much the party they had before they shipped out. And this did happen where at this big party at the Admiralty, Sir John Ross, who did suffer his own denouement from his first Arctic expedition. Barrow, who had been very safe and warm back at home, felt that John Ross turned back too soon, and Ross had erroneously decided that Lancaster Sound, that wasn't actually a throughway, that it was closed off. There are reasons to believe that this could have been a mirage. It could have been a trick of the magnetic north and messing with the instruments. It could have been that there was a giant ice block there and it looked like land. And he was just like, well, it's closed off. We can't go this way. Better turn back. So he was very disgraced because of that. And he probably could have said...
He's known as the guy who turned around and went home before it was necessary to do so.
Yeah. So he's also there as, like, a warning to Franklin, really, because he had also gone on a second Arctic expedition, which was more successful. But in real life, Sir John Ross was kind of infamous as being the kind of guy who, when it came to relationships, was content to burn 2 boats rather than just one. He could get nasty. And he shows up at this party. And supposedly he just very loudly starts asking Franklin, so what's your backup plan? What do you mean you don't have a rescue mission planned? Which nobody did. But, like, what do you mean? You're okay. Well, here's the deal, Johnny. If you don't come back in 3 years, I'll come look for you myself. Like, brutal stuff on the eve of leaving to find the Northwest Passage.
And now this is all intercut with... Oh, sorry, Joy, go ahead.
Yeah, that's what I love is the juxtaposition, because you get that scene and then you also get a scene with Franklin's wife, who she makes some poor decisions, but I kind of stan his wife, honestly. His wife is extremely supportive and also one of the big reasons that people even went looking for him. But we'll get to that. But so... she's extremely supportive, and she's listing off all these things of, like, please don't listen to these people. Like, you know, they just don't want you to win, you know?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, and I also like how she keeps making it, they don't want us to win.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, because if he wins, it reflects on her, because that's how the society works.
Yeah, because, yeah.
Well, like, just the cinematography, the choices of positioning, like, all of this is really interesting, because, like, you have her giving Franklin all the power in the shot, because she's shot mostly from either the side or the back. Mm-hmm. And in the other scene, you have Ross with all the power, because Franklin is either to the side or even off screen being yelled at by Ross.
Yeah.
And like, they're both really bright scenes. Like, the sun is shining on both of them. Like, it's really interesting that it's like, these two things can be true.
Like, yeah. Yeah. And like the Lady Jane one, it's just them. It's domestic. It's in the ship. Like, this in real life, Lady Jane actually lived aboard the Erebus for a couple of days before it set sail to make it nice and homey for him. And, you know, so she would have been on board. That's when she presents him Jacko, which is actually a girl monkey. And I like that contrast between her trying to leave these last, like, chin up, domestic love and affection, and like, I believe in you. And then you have John Ross being like, you'll eat your boots. You'll eat worse than your boots. Mm-hmm. You know what men are like. And we see it in this episode, the first stirrings of the mutinies and the whisperings and the lines that are starting to divide the crews.
Right. But of course, and as the episode continues, these two voices are really warring with each other within Sir John. Right?
Yes.
Because he's constantly trying to keep up that brave and cheerful face, right? But more and more and more, as we approach the end of this episode, we see that mask starting to crack. And we see him starting to fall apart. And what this flashback does is show us, like, a little bit of where that came from.
Yeah, that self-doubt, that doubt that comes from, you know, very good advice and very good questioning of what your plan even is.
And I'm pretty sure we end on Ross.
No,
the flashback ends on Ross, if I'm not mistaken. To be like, because you have no rescue plan. And then it's just the empty plate at the table. And he's like, no, I don't. I don't have a rescue plan.
Well, that's
I'm
also
screwed.
Like, as he's thinking about all of this, that's also when he decides that he wants to hold a divine service so that he can give Gore a proper eulogy.
Yeah.
Because what else is he going to do? He doesn't have a rescue plan.
What else is he going to do, right? And, you know, but also he wants to acknowledge what's happened and use the moment to uplift his men's spirits, right? And here he is. That's what he does. He's putting together a divine service. Now, one of the core scenes directly after this is the scene with the takedown, right?
Yes.
And this is that self-doubt again, because we can get into the details of it, but the moment Sir John bristles and the moment Sir John actually crosses that line is when Francis takes it one step too far and questions Sir John's captainhood and who he is as a captain.
Was that it? Wait, which part are you talking about?
So, like, Sir John is planning his eulogy for Gore, right? Francis stops by, he's got a request, and Francis wants to send a sledge party south, not to look for leads, and instead just to get help, right?
Yeah.
Like, if this search party can travel the 800 miles to wherever they're going, and Nella, I'm sure you have an actual vision for this geography, and I'm just trusting what this show tells me.
So what they're aiming for are the Hudson Bay Trading Company. Yeah. They're aiming for the fur traders and other whale traders. They're their outposts that are, 800 miles south through Canada. And that's their best bet, aside from trying to transverse the ice to get back past Lancaster Sound and possibly getting to the straits where the whalers are. But you're better off heading south. And that ends up being, spoilers, what the plan ends up being when they abandon the ships. We head south towards Canada.
But by then it's too late.
And by then it's too late. But, you know.
Wait, so are they hoping to travel south and then bring back help by the following spring?
By that point, they would have access to the Hudson Bay, and they would be able to, you know, ships would be able to get word out to whalers and other ships to look for the Terror and Erebus.
This is Crozier's Hail Mary.
No, it is a Hail Mary.
This is a Hail. Like, this is not a solid plan, but this is Crozier sitting up late at night being like, this is the only other option I can think of, and otherwise.
Like, we literally cannot overwinter again.
Now, on one hand, Franklin is not wrong that this is a brutal Hail Mary thing to attempt, because Franklin had done the overland route back in like 1819. He had traveled that 500 whatever miles through that backwoods, and it was brutal. This is not easy terrain. The river that they would be traveling down, like, you can't even really take a boat down it. There's a lot of rapids. You'd have to like get in the boat, then get out of the boat, carry the boat. It's going to be a mess. It's going to be dangerous. But again, it's a Hail Mary pass, and it is June, and they have at best like 3 months to get as far south as they can.
Yeah. So Francis is there. He's making his argument, right? And, Sir John does make those arguments back. He's already lost 6 men. He doesn't want to lose 8 more. Francis is like, but we could lose everyone. Sir John is also like arguing about like the message this will send the men, right? Like, oh, if we send a rescue party out, it'll send the message to the men that we're a group of
we're in need of rescue.
Saving. Right?
Yeah.
But the line that I wrote down, and the line that causes Sir John to bristle, is when Francis says a captain should prepare for the worst, not what they hope for. And that's where I felt like I saw Sir John's entire demeanor change.
Now, was that before or after? Because so he says something, and then he closes the door, and then he really gets into it.
It's after Francis says that Sir John closes the door. It's like Francis says that, and Sir John's like, wham!
So here's the thing. What's funny to me is Franklin was already breaking before any of that happened.
True.
And you know that because Crozier lays out this plan. It's a ridiculous plan, but it's a plan. And Franklin, Crozier is composed and calm and just like, I hate to bring this to you while you're grieving, but I think this is our best option. And Franklin insults him.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. You are a man. Oh, my God. This line is brutal.
Yeah.
You are a man happiest with a glass of knock me down in one hand and an alarm bell in the other.
Yep.
And Crozier has to swallow it, and he still pushes, because Crozier also doesn't know when to back down, because he knows this is do or die. He has to convince Franklin or they will die. So he keeps pushing. You can insult me, but I need to try to save everyone else. Mm-hmm. And that's when Franklin closes the door.
And my favorite part about this scene is because Crozier has that quiet rage the entire time that can actually be mistaken for being respectful.
Yes.
But like, he is just silent, chooses his words very carefully, and just explains everything that Franklin needs to do. And Franklin gets louder and louder and louder until, as you said, he slams the door and is just like, you are telling me about a trip that I have attempted, and I know this is impossible. And also, what will the men think if we do this?
Right. But then, Sir John takes it a mile further and turns
then he makes
this entire
it personal.
thing, into
and
a personal
I wrote it
attack.
down. I wrote it down.
Too. Oh my gosh, I love it.
Here we go.
Read
it. Then he, and again, full middle school girl. He goes, you are the worst kind of second, Francis. You abuse your freedom. You complain in the safety of speculation. You claim foresight in disasters that never happen. And you're weak in your vices because your rank affords you privacy and deference. You've made yourself distant and miserable and hard to love, and you blame the world for it.
What? Tell me again about a Brown study, Franklin. Tell me again.
God. Oh my God. It's like when you had the best friend, right? And then you kind of cooled off in your friendship, but you still think you could be civil. And then all of a sudden they just turn on you, and everything bad about you that they've ever been privy to, but they've never said anything about. It's like gloves are off. Gloves are fucking off, man. Unbelievable.
He lays it all out, and then he does the irritating thing.
I feel it in my
pit of
my stomach.
Maybe this is my fault. Maybe this is my fault for sympathizing with you.
Oh, talk about a killing blow. I take some responsibility for that.
The vanity of your outlook. Woo-hoo-hoo.
The vanity. The audacity of this bitch.
My favorite thing about the writers of this show is they were able to make all of that so prescient and like you understand every single thing he says. There are very few colloquialisms, but you know, there are a few sort of tucked in there and the florid language of the time, but you understand every single thing he says.
Oh, yeah.
And then worse, he ends on there were some things we were never meant to be the one to the other, and I see that now. And that's like the final slap because that's Sophie.
No, wait. Yeah. I was like waiting for you to read the line. You got to read the line, Nella. What are the things they will never
Did you write
read
that
of each
one
other?
Down? Yeah.
You read that one. You wrote it all down.
Danielle
I was
wrote it
losing
down.
it. You watched it twice. I was losing it the first time. I was like barely able to keep up. I was like dying.
The things they will never be to each other. After he says, by the way, that he's a person who can tolerate quite a bit, but he has hit his limit, right? And then he says, there are things we will never be to each other. Friends on my side, relations on yours.
Oh, yeah. Oh, just brutal.
Ugh,
brutal.
What a
This is that
low.
like peak petty Karen
even
energy.
And then you cut to outside the door and all the you have Captain Fitzjames there, you've got lieutenants there, and they're all standing there like, oh my God, Franklin's really, holy crap. Like they are like, what the hell? We have, like, I'm sure Franklin never had spoken to anyone like that. Even in real life, I'm sure Franklin never had.
Franklin's whole thing. Like, Franklin's whole thing is that he wants to be liked. He wants to be friends with people. But this entire personal attack ends with, we're never going to be those things to each other, so let's just be what the Admiralty thinks is best for us. Which is a short way of saying, we're going to keep things professional.
But the thing is, Crozier already tried to do that, right? In the last episode where he was like, you're my captain.
Yeah.
No. You misunderstand. Franklin is saying this in anger.
Yes.
Which is why it's just like, it's one of those things, you know, where you have an argument with somebody and then they have to make the idea their own. And it's just like, yeah, you know what? Right. Yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm. I totally didn't say that like 5 days ago, but cool. Let's do that.
Yeah.
So I guess we're just
But no, you had to be angry about it.
On two ships. A captain and his second.
And no, my favorite thing is then he gets up on the deck of the ship and Blanky is there. And Blanky is there and he's like, so we're doing it.
Crozier makes the way back to the Terror. Blanky's outside. He's chipping off ice. And Crozier is like, so we're doing it. And oh, you convinced him. No, we're doing it.
It's mutiny.
And Blanky knows what that means. That's mutiny.
It's mutiny, friends.
And then, of course, Blanky's like, well, and Crozier's like, you know, get me some men. Okay, well, who's going to lead them? Crozier's going to lead them. Mm-hmm. Blanky's like, you're the captain. And of course they go down the line. Blanky's like, well, let me go instead. No, you can't go. You need to stay here in case we do get leads opening. Mm-hmm. You have to be able to read the ice.
Right.
I can't send McDonald. Yes, he also speaks Inuit. But I can't take a doctor away from the men. So I have to go. Mm-hmm. And then if I go, I can claim that I coerced the men into going and they had to follow my orders.
Mm-hmm. So there's a power dynamic there.
Yes.
And also he even says immediately that he's like, just lie to them. Tell them we're going hunting.
Yeah.
So like, in a way, he is kind of sealing these men to just be like, okay, so now that we're actually here away from the ship, this is actually what we're doing. We're going to go south. You know, and like, he doesn't even have to tell them the whole plan. He could be like, well, you know, the bear was sighted south and literally lie to them all the way. You know, like he's already thought of that on his walk back to
what a fantastic
Erebus
episode.
of Terror.
No,
and
like, and in the book, it's implied there's about like 2 miles between the ships. So he had a brisk 2-mile walk to come up with his mutiny plan.
Yes. So here,
I just have to say, I love like the very quiet anger of the Irish.
Oh no,
he encapsulated it perfectly.
I could rewatch Jared Harris's internal meltdown over and over and over and over again. I really could.
Oh, yeah.
You don't. And I'm just like, I'm looking at it and I'm like, Franklin doesn't even know how much he just burned this boat. He doesn't even know how bad. He doesn't know, and he never will.
And he never will is what I was about to say, because these two things are happening in parallel, right? There's the brisk walk. There's the plan in action. Crozier puts his plan in action, which is he tells Blanky to set the men together.
He has such grimness about it, but he also knows it must be done. And Blanky's like, this is treason. You know what that means. And he's like, but if it means the men will survive, it's got to be done.
Because before we flip to the Sir John other half of this episode, like what's happening for the remainder of the episode for Crozier is that he's put the plan in place and then he starts writing a resignation letter.
Yeah.
Right? Because that's what he's decided to do. I'm going to formally resign and I'm going to lead this party because this is it. This is the only way that I can save everyone on this ship.
You can't hang me for mutiny. I quit.
Exactly.
So, what a flex.
While that's happening, Sir John has finished writing Gore's eulogy. And because the men in the, what do you call the bear hunting
Snowblind.
The men in the snowblind are not going to be able to attend the divine service. They have to stay in the snowblind and continue to keep an eye out for the bear. He's like, why don't I bring them some alcohol and lift their spirits?
Oh, no, he wouldn't have brought them alcohol. Well, maybe he would have because but he was a teetotaler. Well, it probably is rum. Bring out the rum.
It looked like he brought over a thing
to warm them up.
Mm-hmm. Like he brought a little Lexapol for all of them. That's what I saw.
In real life, he was such a teetotaler, though. I'm just like, he would never. But then again,
Good sir brought them the rum.
Even on the ship, they still had their daily rum. So, you know.
Mm-hmm. So he's brought them a little something to warm them up. And he goes
and more importantly, he brings the latest in technology, which they did have on board, a camera.
A camera!
Yes, that has to, the perfect old-timey cameras where you have to wait 30 seconds, which, by the way, in the show, they made you wait 30 seconds.
I know. I love that.
So my favorite part about this is he brings Good Sir to take the picture.
Yeah.
And so Good Sir, having encountered the thing that they are hunting,
yes,
has to go away from the men with the guns.
But over by where they put the bait.
Yeah, over by where they put the bait. Stand there for 30 seconds
with underneath the little tenty thing.
Oh, God.
Where you can't see around him. He's like, every little sound is just like, okay, 20 more seconds. Okay. Like I'm surprised he's not just shaking.
I know, right?
Yes, and the truly fantastic thing here is that they're building up that tension. We're literally watching and feeling the seconds tick by, and then you see a disturbance in the snowbank behind the men, and you're like, whoop. And then the rest of the episode happens really, really fast.
Yes, it does. Although I want to make one point about the snowblind, because I found this in the book. I was like, that's a bit on the nose, but I think I kind of prefer it. In the book, they're able to hunt some polar bears that are sniffing around, and they kill a mother polar bear and her cub, and they use the cub as bait. They skin it and they put it up.
Aww.
And now part of me is like, they were never going to show a baby bear being, strung up.
In the show, it's rats. They've got rats.
And this is what I like about it in the book. The reason they use the baby polar bear is because they have this perception that polar bears are cannibals. So a baby polar bear is better bait than anything else they have in their mind, which I think is a perfect setup payoff for, and then they all turn to cannibalism, actually, because white men.
No, that level of mirroring in the book is really good.
Yeah.
Like there are some things the author, the author gets, like he's really good at one of the reasons there's a TV show based on this book. Like he's really good at having that level of horror that you can actually mirror in like everyday things. Well, quote unquote every day. Yeah. You know how you go to the Arctic every day and you flay baby polar bears. That's so sad.
Gosh,
yeah. Again, they never would have depicted a baby polar bear being like skinned and put up like to be eaten. But of course it's the rats. We can kill a couple of rats in the distance and whatever. And then make fun of the cat for not being a good ratter.
Yeah, I was just going to say, this is how you know they were all going to, well, not all going to die. Some of them die. But this is how you know that at least Franklin was going to die, because he talks ill of Fagin. And I was like, and that's when I knew he was not going to survive the snowblind.
Talk shit about cats, get eaten.
Yeah. Get eaten.
That's how, those are just the rules. What can I say?
I love that it's like, he just had this out and out, like, bratty fight with his bestie. And I'm like, yeah, okay. I mean, people disagree. I'm
gonna go hang out with the lads in the snowblind and make fun of the cat. And not get eaten.
Bring them some alcohol. Okay, so he gives them one last encouraging word. He's shaking hands. You're the best. You can do this. And of course, because everyone in the snowblind is enamored with him and they want him to see them as heroes, they're like, hey, I mean, what if you hang out with us for a little bit? We can all sit down. Maybe the bear will show up and you can take a shot at it. And Sir John's like, okay.
Capital idea.
Yeah. And
I love that Good Sir tries to make a way out of the tent.
Yes.
Good Sir
he
is
does not want to be anywhere near here.
Everyone sits down. Good Sir kind of sits towards the back, which always made me nervous when I watched it the first time. I was like, oh my God, but the bear attacks him from the back. Because what happens is one of the dudes just gets straight up lifted up through the snowblind, tears down their tent. Yeah. And is still nowhere to be seen. Like, they're blindly shooting up a cliff. And then the Tumbak, because of course that's what it is, they've never been hunting a bear, throws the body and this decapitated head with like its jaw missing.
He bites him through the middle of his jaw, so that he's missing the lower jaw.
And part of his neck.
So gruesome. It's awesome.
Yeah.
This was a very, I mean, I guess spoilers, this was a very gruesome episode. So if you've made it this far with us, thanks for playing. Things will get more gruesome, but here we are. Yeah. Hopefully that was cool for y'all.
So this body hits the ground. The men are firing shots. Over on the Erebus, Francis hears the shots. He's penning his resignation, by the way.
Yeah.
He hears the shots, and he goes outside like, what's going on? For some reason, when he holds up the telescope to his eye, and it, like, takes a tiny bit off of his eyelid, I also went like, ooh.
Yeah. Well, that's because it's so cold that the cold metal against your skin freezes instantly to the skin.
No. Like, I know, but also, like, I don't know. For some reason, it, like, led very interestingly to the tension of the moment, even though it is so much less gruesome and painful than, like, literally your lower jaw and your neck being ripped off your body.
It helps speak to the surprise and the, like, what's going on. Are they killing it? Are they not? And in the moment, forgetting this most basic of thing when you're up there, like, don't put cold metal against your face, like, because you're just like, better, Crozier, but you put it against your cold face.
I mean, this is also why it's such a great setting for a horror film, right? Like a horror series, because I think it's Hugh, one of the writers on the show, she would talk about, like, it's very important to have those initial deaths on the boat before they even cross over into any issue, because you need to, like, we haven't even introduced you to the horror story yet, but they are literally in a place that constantly wants to kill them.
Yes.
So it's always good to remind yourself that it's like, oh, right, I am still in danger, even though I'm here on my boat telling my Marines to go out there and save the other captain.
Even a bit of cold metal is there to wound you. Okay, so Crozier is leading a group of men. Fitzjames also hears
jumps into action.
Kerfuffle. Jumps into action. I gotta save Sir John.
Yeah.
Okay.
And, the Erebus is closer, so the Terror is going to take more time to run over to the spot.
And, St. John has, like, found his way away from
St. John.
I did.
St. John of the boot eating.
St. John of the tough skin boots. There's your tag.
Yeah.
You're welcome. Sir John has somehow managed to get away from the other men. Like, they've been shooting and he was able to kind of, like, feel his way back, but he's obviously lost his way and he's not sure how close he is to the Erebus, so he just sort of keeps calling out. And that's when Fitzjames is like, my captain, and runs out there. And I think Sir John has this moment where, like, he thinks he might even be okay because he doesn't even hear anything. He's sort of wandered away from all the skerfuffle. they're definitely still shooting at something, but slowly the shots are getting quieter and quieter as the Tumbuk takes out man after man after man.
Yeah.
And then it's Sir John's turn, right as he's coming over. I don't even think he sees Fitzjames yet, right? He's trying to come over a piece of ice.
It's really hard to tell. Like, somewhere in my headcanon, I love the idea that they, like, lock eyes before it's way too late. But I, like, the way it's shot,
because it's dramatic, Danielle. Of course you love that. It's dramatic as hell.
Yeah. But he's trying to crawl his way over this ice rise, and he gets grabbed from behind. And you have this swirling... He's back at that party back in London, and the room is swirling around him, and he looks down and he has both his legs, and we cut back to the ice, and it's the swirl of the ice, and then we cut to Frances and Sophia getting handsy behind her back, like, and obviously digging each other very much and like being cutesy with each other, you know?
Exactly. It's just like all of the decisions that he has made to lead him to this particular moment in his life are flashing before his eyes. And then
he gets dragged to the fire hole. And he gets dropped in the fire hole.
But it's awful. It's awful. I mean, the creature like drags Sir John there by his leg, but by tossing him over to the fire hole, his leg becomes separated from his body, right? And then there's a moment where he's just on the edge of the fire hole, and it's like, maybe I'm gonna make it. But he like looks back, he sees his leg is missing, he's like, ah! And then he gets pushed further into the fire hole. And then the warm pot of water or coals or whatever it is.
It was the coals to keep to keep the ice from reforming. Yes. He lands right on top of it.
He lands on the hot coals. So first of all, that seems terribly painful, but also maybe that will save him, right? Like maybe he's on hot coals, but he won't go into the water. But then the chains break, he's in, and he's done. He's slid into the hole the same way the shaman did. There we go, beginning and end of the episode.
I would try to look a little closer in the scene, and it was kind of cutting fast, and I couldn't really tell. But I think when Fitzjames first gets there, you can still see his coat at the bottom of the fire hole, and Fitzjames is thinking maybe he's still with it enough to grab it. We can pull him up. Yeah. And then his body then disappears under the water.
Yeah. Oh, Fitzjames. My heart went out for him a bit in this scene. I gotta say. I mean, just like that my captain moment that you talked about, Joy, but then him like immediately grabbing a rope and like putting it down the hole. Because he's like, maybe if he's alive down there, he can just grab the rope and nothing grabs back.
We will have to have an entire episode, maybe about halfway through, just about Fitzjames, because Fitzjames is a good, like in history, was a good boyo who would literally do anything.
He was very
down
much
for
a
anything.
Man of action, you know. But he's in a world, he's in a place where being the first one to run in with a gun and having the forethought to grab for a rope, that there's still a chance, like it's not going to serve you in this environment, like it did in China, like it did on the Euphrates River, like it did when you walked mail across the Arab desert for a couple 100 miles because you could. Like, it's just not going to serve you as well. No,
Fitzjames, like, there's a reason Fitzjames has all those stories, you know, like, because he is a man of action. He does all those things. Back at the last episode where it was like, no, really, I do wish I was going on these expeditions to try and find land with y'all, because that's where I want to be. I want to be out there, you know, making sure I'm helping everybody on, you know, in the most actionable place possible. But my favorite thing, only because it's so heartbreaking, is Crozier finally gets to the hole, realizes what's happened, although it hasn't quite clicked for him what that means, that, you know, that Franklin is gone. He gets there and Fitzjames looks up at him and then yells no into the hole.
Into the hole!
Where Franklin went. And I couldn't help it. I started cackling because I thought it was so funny.
Don't leave me with this motherfucker in command. God damn it, Franklin.
Come back. Franklin, come back.
Daddy, come
back.
Where are you? Don't leave me with the souse.
And that's it. That's exactly it, because that is James for the remainder of the episode.
I know. He is distraught. He is upset. He is grieving desperately. There's at least this beautiful moment where Crozier is like, this is not at all how I, never have I not wanted something as hard as I don't want this.
But speaking of making himself miserable and difficult to like, it's like, okay, I hear you. And the very first thing he does after Good Sir goes down is to say, well, I'm issuing an order, send out the rescue party. Which, listen, I get it. It makes a lot of sense. I know we're tight on the schedule, but dude,
there is a little part of me that now sometimes when I watch that scene, I can just hear Yzma from Emperor's New Groove. Well, he ain't getting any deader.
Exactly.
That's exactly that moment. It's one of those things where this is the very difference between him and Franklin, right?
Yeah.
Like he has his flaws too. And even though we understand he's just trying to save people, ultimately that would look really bad if it was so you're not even letting anybody grieve and you're just sending off these 8 men and would you even tell them where they're going? Would they even make it? How would they even, it's an insane idea to just jump into.
Off these 8 men on an order that Sir John expressly forbade.
Yeah,
Everyone heard him say, absolutely not. We're not moving forward with this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, at least the officers.
Well, everyone of consequence. Everyone who matters heard it.
On the Erebus. The Terror has no idea.
Yeah. True. I mean, I think there's also something to be said about this is the third time he's been like, we have to act now or that's it. How the first episode of go for broke. If we didn't, we have to go for broke right now. We have to leave now to try and make it. And maybe we'll get lucky,
But then again, this is an environment where you might get another chance, but you have to act as if this is your only chance. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like, you know, how people are like, when the CDC, back in the day before COVID, when they be like, bird flu, it's going to be bad, take precautions. Or, you know, this disease, it's going to be bad, take precautions. And everyone's like, but nothing happened. You're fear-mongering for nothing. Because they were doing the work necessary.
Exactly.
To keep it from becoming a problem.
Nothing happens because people took precautions.
Yes.
Or quotes on nothing happened. You know, big quotes.
Yeah.
Okay. So there are a few pieces at the end of the episode that I suppose are important, right? Like we have Sir John's funeral, all of that. We already talked about Hickey discovering the resignation letter, but there is the little bit of a wrap up that we get with Lady Silence as well.
Yes.
Yeah. And just one note about the Franklin funeral. Crozier ultimately is like, no, you're right. The men should grieve. But then I'm sending them out, you know. Crozier very smartly, you know, like I think he also listens to the people around him, which we haven't really seen very often because he hasn't been in charge to that extent. I think it's really smart that he decides to take Franklin's eulogy for Gore and change it, because it's ultimately he's like, I know I don't have the words.
Yeah.
So you need to hear from your captain.
No, the commander, the captain.
The commander. You need to hear from your commander right now, and you can't. So, you know, I'm going to give you the next best thing. And I think Crozier at that moment really fully understands like the depth of Franklin's care for the men and how important it is that they understand, you know, hope.
Yeah.
And I don't think
he himself chokes up when he gets to the end of the eulogy he'd written. Because I do think there was a part of Crozier that, you know, did hold Franklin in regard. He loved his niece. There was a part of him that wanted to become a part of that family, and I think did have respect and care for Franklin. And I think it's the tragedy and the sadness of the last things you said to me were very cruel. Yeah. And you will never get the chance to fix that. And now I've lost you. Like, I do think there's an element there to Crozier choking up there.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I really love that we were able to actually see that. That he too is affected by the passing of Franklin, because it's not always easy to see with Crozier. But yes, so that happens. The Hickey unmentionable happens during the funeral. And then we're taken over to where Lady Silence has built her igloo and she's sharpening a knife. And we hear the Tumbok by her. It's a skin of some kind. I'm not well versed. And there's this huff and then nothing. And she opens the flap and there's a seal sitting right there. And I'm like, look, I've been there when it's like, my cat has brought me a present and I'm not exactly sure I wanted that present, but you're also in a place where food is kind of scarce. So
right. But also like at least it left her a dead seal and not like one of the bodies of the men it just destroyed. Like some tiny part of me was like, what is this going to be? Except that we already saw Sir John's leg, like the one bit of him that they could find was like wrapped nicely in his coffin. So it's like, well, it's not that.
Can I tell you, the first time I watched this, I was so horrified that it was going to be another like person's face without a jaw.
Yes. No, that's what I mean. Like, I thought it was going to be like someone's head or something.
An arm, a torso.
I will tell you that Book Tumbok also never leaves like a present of a dead body for Lady Silence.
Oh.
But he does leave seals and stuff.
I think I remember him leaving a seal, yeah. And then Irving sees this and he's like, huh, that's weird. They're working in together.
Dun, dun, dun.
It's so, I don't know. There's a part of me that's just like, Tumbok likes you. He doesn't like these white guys for reasons. And honestly, I can't blame him. And it's fine. It'll be fine, Lady Silence. Just deep breaths.
Deep breaths. She's so scared. She's terrified.
I mean, why wouldn't she be? But like, ultimately, if Tumbok is the kind of creature who will like, there's this implication that he takes the souls of like the unclean or the corrupt and like balances the scales of the land. You're fine. have some solace. That Tumbok is not hunting you.
Yeah. There are many theories for the show of what the Tumbok's supposed to represent. The book bases it very much so, an interpretation of it and a fictionalized version of some mythological aspects of Inuit culture. But in the book, the Tumbok... All right, so let me go into it really quick, because I think this is a good place to bring up what the Tumbok...
This could be like your one more thing. Unless you have one more thing.
I mean, I guess we're at one more thing.
Yeah.
So let me talk about the inspiration for the Tumbok, because
please.
It's pretty certain that the Tumbok is actually based on a sort of tradition from the Greenland Inuit called the Tupulak, which is kind of like a revenge spirit that would have been, it's described as something you would make in a secret, isolated place from perishable materials like parts of other animals, and you'd sew it all up together. And it's supposed to animate and then kill the target you're sending it towards. But if it does not succeed in that goal, it turns back and kills the shaman that sent it. And the only way to escape it coming back and killing you is to make a public confession that you made it in the first place, because it's not good magic. It is not a good thing to do. And early European visitors to Greenland were like, that sounds fascinating. Can you show us one of these things you built? And of course, the Inuit are like, we're not going to make forbidden magic just so you guys can look at it. Here, we'll carve it up in like sperm whale teeth. So like you guys know what we're talking about, but we're not going to make you a killing revenge spirit. That's gross.
But also the whole point is that you like, this is the bad juju that you stay away from.
It's the not good. You don't do it. It can be done, but you're not supposed to do it. So you start, there are depictions of Tapuluk that became very popular to trade with Europeans. And, you know, there are these carvings of these sort of monstrous mishmash of animals and human parts. And that's what they're supposed to depict. Now, in the book, the author really makes it more about how it's like that revenge creature, but it's actually, the Tumbak was made as a revenge creature by the goddess Sedna, who is the goddess of the ocean. But she sends the Tumbak out to go kill 2 other gods. Of course, the 2 other gods are too powerful, so it comes back to attack her. But because she's a goddess, she cuts the Tumbak off from, like, the realm of gods. So now there is an angry, murderous spirit running around the human realm. And for generations and generations, the Tumbak just eats its way through humans up in the Arctic.
Oh.
Until the Inuit figure out a way of communicating with the Tumbak in a way that appeases it. And in the way in the book they do that is by cutting out their tongues, because they have also, he brings in a weird eugenics thing where it's like, you see that they've bred people with psychic ability through careful eugenics.
Oh.
Don't know why we had to go there, but here we are.
Don't want that. Okay.
And then because they have a psychic ability, they're able to psychically connect to the Tumbak. And to show that they are that they are willing to make the kind of sacrifice and suffer in a way similar to how the Tumbak has suffered, because the Tumbak is cut off from the god realm. Mm-hmm. They cut off their tongues. And really what it is, the Tumbak eats their tongue, just
as
rips
like
their
offering.
tongue out from the root and eats it as an offering, so that they themselves are no longer able to communicate with other Inuit like Tumbak could once communicate with the gods.
Yeah.
But they are able to communicate each other psychically. So, and then in the book, the Tumbak is a vengeance spirit that cannot be killed. And, so.
Ooh, I love that.
And the reason he's going after the 2 ships is because the agreement is the shamans who work with the Tumbak are the only ones who are supposed to cross into the white Iceland, right?
Okay, yeah.
And the white men have crossed that line, and the Tumbak is angry.
Dun, dun, dun.
Because no humans are supposed to come into my area. I sit here, I eat seals, I don't eat humans. If you come here,
I eat you.
I get to eat you.
Yeah.
You are now fair game. Danielle, do you have one more thing? Because I have mine, but...
My one more thing was just something we didn't have a chance to talk about, which is Mr. Diggle and Mr. Wall.
Yes.
Was that yours?
Yeah.
Was that yours?
Yes.
We can share
we have
it.
the same one more thing.
Well, one of us will be Mr. Diggle and one of us will be Mr. Wall, and those are our 2 one more things.
Just remember, Diggle, the one who's actually like, I think the cans are a problem, and the other guy's like, I don't know, add more salt. Diggle's the one that Crozier sniped from the Erebus, because like he had been the cook on the Erebus, and he had a reputation for being like the best cook you could possibly have. So so for this expedition, he was the one who got Diggle on his ship. So Sir John had the worst cook.
So what I love about these 2 is one, their repartee. Right?
Yes.
Because they're so fantastic together. But the other is that I assume that this is a little bit of foreshadowing about the trouble to come.
Oh, there's one more thing. That's one part of the foreshadowing of like something's up with the cans. Something's wrong with them. The other foreshadowing is there is this very quiet, sad scene where able-bodied seaman John Morfin sings The Silver Swan, which is a song that tells of the legend that swans are silent and only sing before they die. Like they have a swan song. But he forgets the words, and spoilers, he becomes one of the first to show symptoms of scurvy or lead poisoning. And one of the symptoms is memory loss.
It's an extremely subtle hint.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did we do it? Was that it?
Was so hard.
I think we did it.
Yes, we did do it. We did. And but just like the Diggle.
Yes, talk about Diggle and Hall.
They're perfect. I love them so much. I love that it's like the worst cook is just like, yeah, did you come for more tips, Diggle? And Diggle's just like, I don't need tips from you. I've come here to talk about the rotten meat on our ships. And what does the other cook do but literally eat the can that he like pointed at and is like, add salt. Like, I can't.
We need to work together to solve this problem. And the other guy's like, I've got a solution. Salt. Ha ha. Well, there we go.
There it is.
A great example of another person's ego getting in the way of a very reasonable solution, which is, let's work together to solve this problem.
Seriously.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I guess that's it. So with that, we would love to hear from you. Please check us out at Binge O'Clock Pod on Twitter and Facebook, where you can answer the question, if you were going on a 3-year voyage, what pet would you bring? You can also email us at bingeoclockpod@gmail.com. And don't forget, we have a Patreon. Find us at patreon.com/clockpod.
That's right. And tell your friends, tell your family, tell your loved ones, tell the live lobsters in your life about Binge O'Clock, and we will see you next time.
I couldn't bring a pet.
Oh,
The risk of us dying. Like, is this like a 3-year journey of which it's not incredibly likely we might die, or is it like death's at every corner? Because if I don't know, the risk of I can take my life in my own hands and go on a dangerous journey and maybe die, but an animal has no say in that. And what if I run out of the food?
What if it's a working animal like Fagin, who eats the rats?
I'd bring a vulture.
A vulture.
I mean, sure, the Navy has a fine, upstanding tradition of, ship cats, and we love a ship cat, adore a ship cat.
We stand Fagin.
We stand Fagin.
Yeah, no, Fagin is pour one out for Fagin.
You need a rat catcher.
Yeah. What about a snake?
Oh,
for
for the
snake.
rats. Also for the rats.
Sneaky snake.
Little sneaky snake.
Yeah,
It's a bit cold out there for him.